Freehand drawing directly in ink is a great drawing technique to develop, but it does present its challenges. And one of the biggest ones is, how do we keep things in proportion when we draw, when we can't actually erase any lines that we make? And look, there are different ways we can approach this. But let me explain and demonstrate the ways I plot a drawing that I'm drawing freehand to give myself the best chance to keep all the various elements in proportion relative to each other. I can draw this statue in the right proportion for the base, but I still want this statue and base to be in the right proportion relative to this lamp, as well as relative to this facade. In this scene, looking towards one of the corners of the Place de la Concorde in Paris. What I do when I start a scene directly in ink such as this, what I do is I choose a part to establish as what I think of as my ruler, as my measurement shape. And I choose something which I think I can draw fairly accurately, fairly easily. And also a place where I think I can then draw what's around it relatively accurately in terms of getting the proportions correct. And because of this, this early start of the drawing will be the most time consuming, will take more time. I'll need to go slower and more carefully than the drawing will develop later on. The more I draw with this technique, the quicker and easier it becomes to draw more. But at the start, I have to establish accurate details that I can then use to reference. So for me, with this scene, the rather obvious place is these columns, this colonnade. So I'm going to start by drawing this column and then establishing probably the entablature that sits above these four columns, as well as the top of the balustrade and probably even to the cornice that is under the balustrade, and seek to draw this, as well as some measure of the details of the windows behind it. And then this shape, hopefully as accurately drawn as possible on my page, becomes my measuring point for expanding outwards. But we can expand outwards in more helpful ways than others. So I'll draw this now, and then we'll talk about plotting outwards from this point. So now I've drawn this section here, and I've established this as, if you like, my reference point, my ruler, my measurement place. So having established this, now I move outwards slightly, and I still use this as my means of visually referencing what I'm seeing and what I'm drawing to try and get the proportions correct. So I'm going to do these side parts, this pediment on top. Can I just point out that with the pediment, the corners of the pediment on the right hand side is here, which aligns up with this line and with pretty much to the right of center of this column. But on the left hand side, it actually goes to here. It actually extends quite some way to the left. And these are the details we need to see and to capture to get a sense of three-dimensionality. So always important to observe those bits. So I'm going to move across and up, aligning what I do with what I've already done. So these lines align with these niches, align with the windows underneath. Okay, so now we've got this central part done and I can start to move out. Now, of course, I wouldn't have to do all of this detail, particularly at this point. It really would be enough to establish the outside edges of these shapes. But I kind of like to get the detail done, sometimes at least, as I move along, particularly at the start, because it helps me visualize this, I think, more accurately. I'm drawing with a 0.2mm pen, which is really pretty much as thick as I'd want to be using for this amount of detail on this scale. Now, as I consider my wider scene, I'm looking at this lamppost as the next thing I will draw, or the next thing where I will draw at least part of it. Because while it doesn't overlap with this section, it does overlap with this section right next to it. And I've drawn enough now that I can get a sense of the scale. So now I reference off what I've already drawn, and I see that the top of the lamp, which is here, there's actually a white bird on top, which I won't draw, aligns with the top of this niche, and that the base of the lamp itself is just above this corner. So I'm going to use that as my reference and then just bring the actual lamppost down a bit. I won't take it right to the ground, but I'm going to bring it down to about here, what I think is about here. When I've done that, I'm going to start to draw this section here with the lamp and probably try and get it to the top of this railing here at street level. Now I'm noticing that my perspective angles are changing. They're sloping from top right to bottom left here, but with this rail they're actually sloping up the other direction slightly. So eye level is going to be just a little bit above the eye level of the pedestrians that we have in this scene. I'm on just slightly higher ground than these people are when I take this photo. But otherwise, I'm doing the principle that I've talked about. I'm aligning what I draw now with what I've drawn above. And once I've got this railing in place, I'll draw this lamppost in as well, which I then will be able to align with what I've drawn to the right. So I reference and align, I reference and align. And while it's all a bit intense at the start, as I move further away, I also take the opportunity, if I realize I've got things not quite in proportion, to, if you like, re-establish a more accurate proportion by making some slight adjustments in other elements as I move out. But I hope I won't have to demonstrate that technique for you. So now we'll get these lamps and this section and this balustrade here at least partially drawn. Okay, so now I've completed what I said I was going to be doing. So now we're starting to move into the left-hand side of our drawing where we have very different subjects, but we linking them, we do have this bit of architecture at the back. And I think I'm actually going to switch to a 0.1mm pen just for this section so that it feels like it's sitting back a bit more. What I think I'm going to do now is I'm going to plot this balustrade and put in these figures because they'll be easier now to get in proportion once I've got this railing behind them in place. at least these two figures. I think I'll leave this one for now because this one is actually quite a bit further away than these ones. And I think it will be easier to get this scale correct after I've drawn this. So I'm going to work it for now, establishing a little bit of this silhouette edge, as well as at least the outlines of this behind. And then I'm going to draw the base of this statue, I think, getting its vertical alignment by referencing carefully off what I've already drawn. So I'll be establishing, for instance, where the top of this doorway is in relation to this section, where the top of this base section is, and so forth. And then when I've actually got the, if you like, the platform for the sculpture done, I'll then be aligning the head, and that will give me the high point, and then I'll be coming down. But this statue I'll probably be drawing more by negative space because it has lovely dark tonal values behind it to make it come forward. So, time to start drawing again. So here we have our corner of the Place de la Concorde. So in reality, I didn't draw this sooner as I thought I might. It made more sense to be continuing with these trees and to start to plot the base of this sculpture of the city of Rouen from the figures that I'd drawn moving across horizontally, as well as then aligning with the vertical features of this building. And this is where, of course, we now see details that we've forgotten. I thought it looked a little bit empty up in that corner. So I think this is a good strategy for thinking to draw directly in pen, but to have a means of keeping our structures in proportion both to themselves and to each other. And if we make a point of going deliberately slowly at the start to ensure greater accuracy, then we find we can actually start to draw quite briskly, because it becomes very quick and easy then to reference from what we've already drawn. The thing I haven't done is I haven't put the shade marks on the front of this building as I did here. According to the sun, most of this building is also in a very light shade, but I wanted it to stand out more as a balance to this sculpture in the sunlight here. And I think the only other thing I'm going to do is to add these horizontal lines here, just to create a bit of difference between this lower section and the upper section that we do actually have in life. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you found this interesting, and I hope you found it helpful, and I hope it encourages you to have a go drawing freehand directly in ink with a strategy now to try and control the very at times difficult and intimidating issue of keeping things in proportion. But you don't know until you have a go. You'll find this photo on my channel community page if you want to print off a copy of this, but of course you can use any subject you want. But look, whatever you draw, however you draw in it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.